All right, this is Neil with Icon Vehicle Dynamics, and I'm here with Scott, and we are going to talk about Bronco and all of the new suspension applications that we can talk about with that new vehicle coming out. I remember 2-3 years ago when SEMA was all JT Gladiator. A year and a half, 2 years later, man, you couldn't turn around without seeing a Bronco. And here we are coming to market as fast as Icon does, with just about everything we can do for all of the Bronco editions that are coming available.
We try to hit them all, yeah. And there's a bunch to choose from. Ford did not make it easy for us by any means. But yeah, so the full suspension offering for the Bronco is available. We have, like you mentioned, pretty much everything. You want to, we can replace every stock component of that suspension almost. So getting started, the biggest part of it is really going to be the coilovers. And a Bronco is kind of unique where it's got coilovers on all four corners versus most trucks don't.
Yep.
So that gives us a lot of cool things to do as far as lifting it, and you usually have some adjustment on front and rear. So our introductory shock line we call the EXP series, 2.5 inch diameter shock. It does utilize the factory coils. So it would be kind of like some people call it a cartridge or stuff like that, where you're just getting the shock absorber and you're really utilizing all the stock stuff from basically here up. And it has grooves machined into the cylinder that utilize a snap ring to allow you to set your different ride heights. And this setup is going to be compatible with either the Haas 1.0 or the Haas 2.0 system. So that's what you kind of have to qualify with the customers to what they have. Easiest way to look at it, the Haas 2.0 is they got the yellow body, easy to identify. The Haas 1.0 is just that standard black body, doesn't look like anything special, it's like an unbranded shock.
So Haas, you had mentioned earlier, is the nomenclature that Ford is using for their suspension series. Correct. Haas 1, 2, 3, and 4, correct?
Correct, exactly.
Good, okay.
Yeah, and so the Haas 2.0 system comes standard on the Sasquatch package equipped Broncos, which are very common, but the 1.0 is standard on a non-Sasquatch, with the exception of the Badlands trim. That's kind of that weird one where even if you get a non-Sasquatch Bronco, you're gonna have that Haas 2.0 system. Okay. So it's muddy, but once you clarify, the easiest way to just look at the shocks. And if they're yellow, it's 2.0. If they're black, it's 1.0. That's the easiest way to go about it.
On the EXP system, and you're in that Haas 2.0 at this point, what are the attributes that the Icon shock is offering as opposed to the OE shock that is on that Haas 2.0?
Okay, so they actually market that shock as a pretty trick little unit, and it's got a lot going on inside, but when it comes down to the end result and the performance you're getting out of it, no matter how you look at it, our shock's gonna beat it. Even though it doesn't have that little piggyback reservoir on it, once you add in the total volume of oil inside the shock, you're getting a little bit more overall. Yeah. So it's a bigger body, more oil, so it's gonna have better heat dissipation and capacity than the stock shocks, so you can work them harder without fading. And it's also a fully serviceable unit, so you never, instead of having to buy those again, a few years down the road, you just rebuild this guy and it's back to being brand new and back on the road. And that bigger shock also gets just a bigger piston, and the bigger piston is going to give you better performance, better ride quality, because you can get a more specific tune just because you have more options on your valving on the inside of it.
Perfect. Okay, so then you've got that 2.0 system, we've got the EXP opportunity here that we've got that goes inside the OE replacement, and now you've got the 3.0, and the vehicle owner says, I'm going to go wheel this.
Gotcha.
Right? So that brings us over to
our full 2.5 inch series.
2.5 inch series. Walk through those real quick.
So we have a front shown without the remote reservoir. This is actually the internal reservoir version.
Internal reservoir.
And then we have a rear shown with the remote reservoir. Both front and rear coilovers are available with or without the reservoirs. And then with the reservoir option, you have different options for adjustment, either our CDC valve or our CDV valve. Comparatively speaking to the EXP, these are going to give you a very similar ride because the tuning and everything and what's going on in the guts is very similar to what's on the 2.5 EXP, but you're getting more travel out of the whole system because of the integration of our coil spring. We have to limit a little bit just to make this coil work, and the better spring rate associated with that. Having the spring rate better tuned to the vehicles is going to make it ride better, more plush than what you're able to get with just the stock unit. And then you have that infinite adjustment of the ride height via the threaded body instead of just a few different settings utilizing the snap ring. So
and then finally, to top it all off, you've got the IIC technology that you can go to that next level as well.
Exactly. Yeah. If you're looking for that all-around ride quality, regardless of the situation, the IIC and the CD-EV combo will give it to you. Just because that's going to take all the guesswork out of setting up the suspension. You set up a few basic baseline settings on the app to kind of tell it more so how aggressive you're looking to be, and it'll take it from there. And it'll ramp up the shock damping when warranted, turn it back down when it's not, and it happens so fast and so often that it doesn't feel like anything's happening, it just feels consistent. Versus if you have, say, the CDC valve, where you set it on a certain setting that may be really good for a lot of the time. Say you come back onto a smoother section of the road and the shocks are set up a little too stiff, it may feel a little firmer till you get back out and turn the knob. The CD-EV and the IIC just take all that out. It happens all the time.
Just nails it. So with the coilovers there, Scott, then you've got to put these arms. They're coming along, they're buddies, right? When you purchase them, you're going to do the same.
For the most part, yes. You want to is the better way to explain it. So that's where the sum of our system is better than just the individual components, because you have to look at it a couple different ways. The factory arm on the Bronco actually has a pretty legit ball joint in it that cycles pretty far. And so far, in fact, that our standard delta joint that we've used forever and the industry standard uniballs, they're just not going to work. They're not going to cycle as far, so you have to run a shorter shock and therefore less travel.
So somehow on the Bronco, the articulation is just different and allows for a higher degree?
Correct. Yeah, it's the Bronco, the stock arm is pretty unique in that it will cycle further than most aftermarket arms out on the market. And that would apply to our competitors. So if you were mixing and matching here and you wanted to run our coilover, if you want to run an aftermarket upper arm, you have to be very careful what you choose, because depending if you're just running a standard uniball, chances are it's going to overcycle and bind up before the shock reaches its full extension, which is not good. The stock arm can be retained with our coilovers because it will cycle far enough, but the problem is you're limited with alignment at that point. You can't go very high with your lift or your alignment is all out of whack. So two birds, one stone, our either billet aluminum control arm with the Delta Joint Pro or our tubular steel version, which also includes the Delta Joint Pro, solves that. So the new...
Take a minute to go through the Delta Joint.
Yeah.
It's exciting.
So the Delta Joint Pro is very similar in all respects and from the way she looks and the way she works to our standard Delta Joint, except it's larger. So it cycles up to 90 degrees of articulation, which is actually further than the standard Delta Joint. And it's fully serviceable. So you can take it apart and change the guts as they wear out, rather than just having to press the whole ball joint out of the arm as you would with the standard Deltas. From a longevity standpoint too, we actually upgrade this guy utilizing a brass scraper seal on the bottom. Well, now she doesn't want to come out. There we go. So it utilizes a scraper seal made of brass to physically wipe debris away from the ball. We don't use a boot on the Deltas or the Pros just because of the high angle at full articulation. Well, that guy's nice and tight. But at full articulation, it will basically get pinched between the taper and the arm.
And that rubber's gone anyways, and
it defeats the purpose.
Point.
Correct, yeah. So now you got junk all up inside the ball joint. And this wiper is a very effective means of keeping the debris out while allowing for that extra angle. And so we warranty these guys for 5 years, assuming you have it paired with one of our suspension systems, which in reality means the matching front coilover to go along with it. That way we know that the everything is set up correctly from a link standpoint, and you're good to go.
There you go. All right, anything else that a Bronco owner needs to know? Anything else that a counter salesperson needs to know when a Bronco owner is walking in and talking about options with their new vehicle?
Mm-hmm. So if they're actually wheeling the truck, the biggest point of improvement from a articulation standpoint is going to be the rear end. The front actually flexes pretty well. They've got that pretty trick sway bar available where it disconnects, and so it gets out of the way. But the rear end honestly has a lot of inherent bind in it, so it doesn't like to flex. So changing out the rear links and the rear track bar for one of our units is a good way to help free that up and keep it more stable on the rocks. We offer billet aluminum versions and tubular steel versions of these links. All are going to be adjustable. The tube links need to be removed from the vehicle and adjusted. Pretty standard. We've talked about that on the Jeep stuff. But the billet links are a trick in that they can stay on the truck and be adjusted. You just leave it bolted in place, loosen the bolts, spin your adjuster sleeve, and it'll shorten or lengthen the link accordingly. And you can do that on the alignment rack, so it's very easy to set it up. Another thing I'll mention, you may notice these guys.
Yeah.
Our rear coilovers, they mount kind of opposite of traditional. So they mount with the shaft up, and so the body is actually on the axle. And that makes a kind of a unique problem. Well, what do you do with the reservoir hose?
Sure.
So we actually run it right along the links. Our billet links have this milled out portion right here, so the link routes right along the top of it nicely and out of the way. And our tubular links, and also if you want to keep the stock links, we have bracket kits available that will route those
perfect
in the same manner.
Well, I tell you, I've been out wheeling, and we did some overlanding, and I've seen these new Broncos, 4-doors and 2-doors, just everywhere. Ford just did a great job with those. Nice to see that Icon has stepped up, and for customers that are looking for the opportunity to go deeper, further, whatever it is, just hit a bigger rock. I think you've got options here, right?
We sure do. We'll get all the performance that we can out of those guys and hurt some Jeepers' feelings.
It's about time. Hey, if you have any more questions, go to www.iconvehicledynamics.com or call us here at Icon and let us help you to make sure that you get the right products to your customer. Thank you.
Thank you.